Hi class, today we're going to be doing a short video about the life cycle of a star part 1, where we're going to talk about the beginning stages that all stars go through in their life cycle. So SWABOT, students will be able to describe the different phases of a star's life, and in particular this video we're going to talk about which phases all stars go through. So the life cycle of a human goes through developing in the mother's stomach to birth, when they're babies, toddlers, youths like you guys, adulthood, old age, and finally death. So we're going to kind of be comparing the life cycle of a star to the life cycle of a human. Where do stars come from? So in space, there are areas that are called nebula, and those basically are just areas of clouds of dust and gas that are floating around in space. So not all of space has nebula, but these nebulas exist, and gravity starts pulling together the gas and dust, and that is where stars are born. The very beginning part of a star is called a protostar. Proto is the Latin word for first or earliest form of, and inside the nebula, gravity starts combining this dust and gas into different areas, and as they get closer together, gravity increases, the temperature increases, the particles start heating up, and there's reactions occurring. So just like a developing baby, like stuff is happening and forming inside the nebula to have eventually a star being born. So when a certain temperature is reached in that protostar, something called nuclear fusion begins. And nuclear fusion is a reaction where two hydrogen atoms, which have one electron and one proton each, so it's the number one element on the periodic table. Most of the universe is made out of hydrogen. So we get two atoms of hydrogen that are getting combined together, fused together to make helium. And helium is the second element on the periodic table. It has two protons and two electrons. So the star is taking two atoms of hydrogen and fusing them into helium. And that reaction produces light and heat energy. So a star is a hot ball of gas undergoing nuclear fusion. So what I just described, fusing hydrogen into helium. So if you think back to The Lion King, do you remember the scene where Pumbaa and Timon and Simba are laying on the ground and they're looking at the stars and they're like, oh, do you ever wonder what those stars are and where they come from? And Pumbaa gives a scientific explanation that they're hot balls of gas in space, and he is actually correct, even though they laugh at him. Anyway, so when you think of a star, think of Pumbaa and a hot ball of gas. So they spend most of their lives, so like their entire adulthoods, fusing hydrogen. When the hydrogen is used up, it will fuse heavier elements. Main sequence is the kind of the term that we use to describe what adulthood is for a star. So stars spend most of their lives in the main sequence phase. They are undergoing nuclear fusion, fusing hydrogen into helium, and they radiate the energy that's produced and light and heat into space, and that's how we see the light from the stars from Earth. So what happens next in their life cycle depends on the mass, or how big the star is. So discussion questions. How do the phases that we've just talked about compare to the phases of a human life cycle? And this is a very philosophical meme today. If stars are not alive, how can they have a life cycle? And as always, science rocks.